Howdy folks, this is Trader Big T with your trading lesson of today, where we will be looking at some of the live calls that we made in the Tim Alerts chat room. Okay, this morning a trader entered a play on Perigo, which gapped up very strongly on some news. The stock has been pretty darn strong for some time, and they tried to short the huge gap up. They tried to short it. And I wanted to say something about that because few people have been doing that. They think that they can inverse a dead cat bounce, a huge gap down play, where, after a few minutes of play, maybe 15 minutes in, the stock may start to bounce. But that really doesn't work the same way on these reversed plays. Here is a daily chart of Perigo, very strong stock. It actually pulled back, almost made a scan of mine for a multi-day pullback like on a swing. Should have taken that trade, I can see that. But we had this kind of breakaway giant gap. It wasn't a short. It just wasn't. And the trader lost some money on this, and eventually had to sell the stock off. When it gaps down massively and it opens up again, once that order flow pans out, and the crazy panic ends, the market makers sometimes will have to take the opposite side, and you're going to get some sort of a bounce. But when it's long, when you're trying to short it, like a reversed version of a dead cat bounce play, uh, it, it it just isn't the same. Yeah, I haven't had success for it. If you want to short something that's up massively on the first day, for one thing, that can be pretty risky. And for another, if you're going to do it, you're probably better off doing it later on in the day when the landscape is pretty well defined and you see some weakness, but not right out of the gate. That's usually not a great idea. Okay, let's move on. PAET. This was another kind of a momentum play that was called in the breakout. If there's actually a chart on this, and this was a key point, I think, here, and this was beaten later on during the day in this big kind of rise here, and I think that was called live. It wasn't the greatest play. Okay, I want to talk about ISSI. This was the I think the earnings play that Tim called for a long play, and the stock didn't work out. But that just happens sometimes. It's really not a question of the call. It's a question of sometimes it just doesn't work out. You can do everything right and you can still lose money. In this case, once that intraday support was cracked, I think it was over about like 860, low 860s. Once that went out, you just had to cut your losses. And he cut his losses, I believe, at 870. And a lot of people cut as well, somewhere around that point, because they recognized that it just wasn't going to zoom and you can't tie your capital up. So, it just goes that way sometimes. You can't beat yourself up over it. The play was reasonable. Tim's call was reasonable. It just didn't work. Okay, and ONTY, O-N-T-Y. This was very well played, I believe, by Geckler. He has a Twitter page, and he got in like very early here, and he wrote it just pretty much perfectly. Got in 2 something, I think, and got out at right over here. This gap is like a way gap down type of scenario, like a dead cat sort of thing, but he got it like before the open. It was like in pre-market. I really don't like that play. I prefer when it doesn't fill the gap in pre-market, and then you have the panic, and then you have that that reverse on the order flow when the MMs get involved a little bit. But I don't berate him. I think his timing was perfect. He got out somewhere over here, and just a beautiful little play for a longer. Okay, then Somex. This was a later part of the day, like 1300, somewhere around here. Boom, boom, boom. Huge momentum and massive volume. And any time when that, broke out, it was just a very obvious call. It was made in the chat room, and I think it took out this earlier high. Actually, it was a bust of the 10 a.m. high, which is a very, very good point of reference. Oftentimes, a stock will make a decent high right before at 10 a.m. when it's on the upswing. And then, it'll base and it'll go sideways, which kind of Somex did. Then later on in the day, after several hours of going with this sideways price action, suddenly on volume, it takes out that original price. And here, I believe, what was it? Maybe 887, something like that. It just smashed through it. You can see this huge volume here on that first stick when it took it out, and then just zoom, it was off to the races. So it was just a beautiful long marathon momentum, and I think we called that. Okay, now here are my standard bread and butter type of plays, and I made these calls. Everybody was really fascinated with MSEH for obvious reasons, so they really didn't see this, but these are really the bread and butter plays. These are not really Tim's style. These are kind of like playing a specific pattern, you know, where you get like this 10 a.m. high and you get that sideways price action, you know, consolidation, and then break out of that initial 30-minute high later on in the day. You know, like right here, these were textbook examples. INCY, I called this early, right at the first moment when it busted that price, which I believe was, what was it, 1375, like 1375. It did it, and you'll notice, you come over here, you'll start to see those sticks where that volume was really high. That was just that was the volume, and boom, you know, it just took off. And GGP, this was the short. This was kind of like the momentum, that short that just smashed down on this volume. This was called by Reaper live, and there was more downside action here. I recovered just a little bit, but you know, it played out pretty well, and this was called live, and you had plenty of time. You could have made some money off of that one. Okay, AEN, that's another kind of momentum thing that broke. I didn't really care for this. I made a quick note of this, but I didn't really like this play too much. I don't like the chart. I don't like the long-term chart. I don't like nothing about it. Pozen, P-O-Z-N. That was another one where it was delayed. You remember, this was that's that same pattern that I love to play, that consolidation, that early high, and then straight sideways price action, and the end of day breakout. Well, here it kind of gave this fake out. Right towards the beginning, towards the first 15 minutes, it looked like it was a big, giant, colossal failure. Then I missed this zoom, and one of our members talked about it and said, oh my gosh, this is working. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. You know, too bad I missed it, because it worked out quite well, and that was just beautiful. So Pozen still was in play, and some people begged some coin on it in the chat room. Okay, Zane, we all know that story. I think this is the red shower, and this one just died. You know, back up to those 240s, and then takes out the 240s and fades the rest of the day. If you could get shares, you're great, but that's probably a fantasy. Okay, and then here was the other breakout call that I called live in the chat room again, MPG. And what do we see here? We see this one day, you know, it just goes up, and it has this nice, puts this 10 a.m. high. Actually, it kind of went higher than that, and it actually started going sideways over here, more like 1035 here in the east. And there was like a high, like 296, you know, so basically around the $3 level. Then you see, what do you see again? At that 1300 point later on in the day, couple hours of sideways price action, you see this huge, giant candlestick, and then bang, just flies right by it. And just beautiful. Just a nice long that you could close at the end of the day for a great coin. Okay, that pretty much does it, folks. This is Trader Big T, and until next time, we'll see you in the trenches as you learn to trade with Big T.